Hi everybody, it's Maya Zahira with Psychic Protection Sanctuary, and we are now live in our Psychic Protection Sanctuary Facebook group. And the wind is really blowing outside. I was like hearing a sound and wondering what it was. Wind chimes. So I finally got on here. I'm a couple minutes late. My Facebook decided that it wanted to update, I guess, right as I got on here to go live. So here we are. Welcome everybody. So as the people are joining live in our Facebook group, I want to just give a quick shout out to those of you on our YouTube channel, which is also called Psychic Protection Sanctuary. So hello there. Welcome to the video. This is a Facebook Live, so you can expect that this is a casual video where we're talking back and forth. It's unedited, and but still full of valuable information. So, hi Jennifer, hi Stephanie, good to see you guys. Our topic for today is which ascended masters are false light entities. We're going to talk about also a little bit about Doreen Virtue's old deck, the Ascended Masters deck. And if you don't know what false light entities are, I'm going to explain that today too. It's going to be a really interesting conversation, so I'm glad that you're all here. Those of you who are joining live, as usual, go ahead and let us know where you're joining from. And because it's just fun to find out where you all are. And you all get a chance to kind of say hi and meet each other. Hey, Joe. Hey, Stephanie. Jennifer says, looking forward to hearing about this topic. Thanks, Maya. You're very welcome. So, what I always do at the very beginning is I go over some announcements. We just get all that over with so that we give everyone else a chance to get on here and join live. Well, also, I posted the wrong time for this class the last couple of days. Oh my gosh, totally my mistake. It's a long story, but Arizona doesn't do daylight savings time change. Everyone else around us does, though. I live in Arizona, and so when all the time shifts, everybody shifts around me, but I don't shift, and it gets super confusing. Anyway, I messed up on when our time was going to be. It's going to be back to normal next month. Don't even worry about next month. I will announce it because that'll be too confusing. If we're thinking about this month's time and next month's time, don't worry about that yet, but it'll go back to normal. I ended up scheduling a client session during what was supposed to be our Facebook Live, and just because these time changes are so confusing when I'm the only one who's not changing. So that's what happened. Thanks for being here. I just saw several other people joined in. Good to see you guys. Part of our Facebook Live is about making connections. So anytime you want to share a comment, question, anything at all, don't be shy. And also remember that it takes about a minute for it to come through and for me to see it. So if you have a question, start typing fast. Joe is joining us from Mazatlan, Mexico. Excuse me, Lourdes from Lawrence, Kansas. And Nora is here. Nora, tell us where you're joining from. So while people are still joining, I'm going to get our announcements out of the way, and then we're going to get into talking about which ascended masters are false light entities. All right, so just to recap, I already mentioned this before, but if you missed it, those of you who are watching on YouTube, this Facebook Live is in our free Facebook group called Psychic Protection Sanctuary Facebook group. And so if you want to have more interaction and be able to post and ask questions and participate in our daily theme posts, then I encourage you to get on over to the Facebook group Psychic Protection Sanctuary. And those of you who are already in the Facebook group, you may not already know that I have a YouTube channel, and that's where I upload every free video that I create. And there is a ton of free content. There's like enough that you could binge watch for I don't know how many hours, like hours and hours and hours of information on psychic protection. So I encourage you to go over there, click like, and then the bell notification so that you'll get notified every time I upload a new video. And for those who are looking to work with me more deeply, especially in my group program, Spiritual Empowerment Academy, which is where you really learn in depth how to, how to empower your energy, how to manage your energy, how to develop the discernment skills, and how to clear your energy, how to do all the all the hands-on stuff we do in the paid program. And you can access information about that on my website, which is called www.psychicprotectionsanctuary.com. Psychicprotectionsanctuary.com. Okay. And I'm located in Tucson, Arizona right now. I'm loving it. It's already hot here, so I have the fan on. I hope it's not too loud. And I work with people here locally, but most of what I do is online. So no matter where you live, we can connect. I'm on Facebook a lot, so that's a great place for you to connect with me. I want to do shout outs to everybody who just said hi, and then we're going to get into our topic. I always, being the teacher that I am, I think it's a great idea to have a pen and paper. So if you want to do that while I'm doing shout outs, go grab a pen and paper and a drink of water, and then you'll be ready to go, right? Stephanie says that she's joining us from Vancouver, Washington, and she says, and I have that deck out, so I am excited to sort the cards into 2 piles today. Yay. So I'll have good news and bad news for you on that, but you'll be able to handle it. I'll explain later on your deck. You're in good hands, though. If you do have one of those decks, we are going to be talking about the Ascended Masters deck by Doreen Virtue. If you have it and you want to grab it, that's a great idea. So thank you for mentioning that idea, Stephanie. I hadn't even thought about that. Jennifer is joining us from Sydney, Australia. So cool. Nora is joining us from Arkansas. I feel like I have to sneeze, you guys. It's allergy season. It's been really getting me. I hope I don't sneeze right here on camera. Heather is joining from Colorado. Very curious about this topic. Rose is joining us from San Antonio, Texas. And we have Brett. Good to see everybody. Hi, Jeannie. Okay, I'm going to go ahead with our lesson, even though I didn't get a chance to say hi to everybody who's here. April, hello, all from Livingston, Texas. Very cool. Okay, as usual, I have a ton of notes, and I am going to be looking at them here and there because I want to make sure that I don't miss anything. So the first thing that I wanted to talk to you guys about in regards to this lesson about Ascended Masters and false light entities is who I am and how I even know about false light. And this video isn't about me, it's about this topic. But I feel like it's super important to know about who's telling you this stuff. So whatever teacher that you're learning from or whoever you're getting information from, it's really important to find out who they are, why they know what they know, if they just got it from like some random other teacher or like how they know it, okay? My goal is to help you to think for yourself, but here's what's going on in this scenario, I believe, truly. It's that in this area, I do feel that at this current time, I have more information and knowledge and vision, I guess I'll call it, about false light than most people that I encounter. And I'm not saying that from an ego perspective. That's not what I mean. I mean, like, if you went to school and studied engineering, or if you had a really intense personal experience and you climbed a mountain, like you literally climbed like Mount Everest or something, like you could say that you know a lot more about engineering, or you know a lot more about how to climb a mountain than I do. And that's not from ego, that's just stating a fact, because you've had exposure and experience and like personal encounters, personal experience, hands-on, etc. So you literally know more about that. Okay. So if someone else was going to go climb Mount Everest and they had never done it before, they might consult with you because you have more information on that than they do. And if they withheld information from you, like, well, I'm just not going to tell them, then that would not be very nice. So that's my perspective when it comes to false light. I do genuinely believe that I have a lot more information on this than most people, and I feel that it's my responsibility to share this information with you guys. Just a real quick shout out to Nick. She says, hi everyone, and Jeannie, hello from Piper, Kansas. All right, so who am I and how do I know about false light? I'm going to give a really quick recap of this. I don't want to take the whole video going over the story, but in 2016, I experienced a major psychic attack, like unlike anything that I had ever experienced before. I was not dabbling in anything dark. I didn't bring it on myself. It was totally unexpected. And it happened as soon as I began working with a particular angel healer where I used to live. And at first I was really confused and didn't know what was happening. It was undeniable though. There were lights flashing in the house. There were all sorts of really crazy, like unbelievable things happening. I was seeing all sorts of entities, hearing things. It was just really over the top. But I think the most tangible thing was that like the lights were flashing in my house. So it literally wasn't something that my mind was making up. And the lights were not flashing before that, or like it was something that started when this psychic attack began. And finally, after I think it was 6 weeks that I went through this like crazy encounter that was really terrifying, like so terrifying, I really thought that maybe it was going to kill me. Like I thought maybe I would die. I didn't know if I was ever going to get free from this. At first I didn't know what it was, and then after about 6 weeks, finally I was able to figure out, it's like by the grace of God actually, like I one day had an epiphany, and I saw, it was like all of a sudden the clouds lifted and I saw and understood exactly what was happening. I understood that the angels that this healer believes that she's working with are actually not what they say they are, and that this thing that was attacking me was also pretending to be a group of angels. And that's when I came to understand what false light entities are. Now, I grew up Catholic, and I had always heard stories in some of the Catholic literature about how demons would sometimes pretend to be angels. So I had heard of that type of thing before, but so I knew that like maybe sometimes entities will pretend to be something that they're not. Like that was somewhere in my awareness, but it wasn't something that I had ever had a firsthand encounter with. It was definitely not something I had any level of expertise about until then. And once I saw the truth, then I couldn't unsee it. And I was thinking of an analogy the other day that, you know how on social media sometimes the picture will go around that says like, find the face in this design. It's like a picture that's a design. Find the face. in this design. And at first you're looking and you're looking, you're like, I can't see it. I can't see, like, where is it? You're turning your head different way. I can't see it. Where's the face? And then all of a sudden you see it. Like, oh, there it is. There's the face, or the tiger, or whatever it is that you're supposed to be looking for. And then once you see it, you can't unsee it. Like, every time you look at the picture now, that's what you see. You see it. You know, there's the face, or there's the tiger. And that's what happened to me, that once I had this experience, after that, I was able to see false light as clear as day. And meanwhile, there were all these other people around me, colleagues, friends, etc., who weren't seeing it. Again, I'm not stating that from ego. What I really believe and what I truly hope for is that in time, I really believe that more and more people are going to be opening up to the ability to see false light for what it is. And that's part of why I get on these free videos and I teach things like this, because the more awareness and understanding you have about these things, the more you'll be able to tap in and see what's really happening. I've talked to a lot of colleagues and friends over the years who will tell me that they have really good discernment. Like, so when I tell them, we'll mention about false light entities, they'll say, oh, I have really good discernment about entities. And immediately I'll get a very strong intuitive hit that tells me they think that they are really in tune. And it's because they haven't, it's like I don't even know how to explain it, but like they think they see the answer, but they don't yet. And so they're still interacting with a lot of false light entities. That's not a judgment. It just is what it is right now. Okay. And so again, that's why I teach about this, so people can be more aware. When I experienced my psychic attack, it was in 2016, and that was in the late spring, right at the end of the spring. And so that summer I noticed that I experienced a ton of spiritual downloads. Like, suddenly I had all this knowledge about psychic protection that I didn't have before. And I remember a couple times, like, being in conversations with people and telling them all these different things about psychic protection and answering questions. And at a particular moment, I'd be like, how do I know this? Like, I didn't read this in a book. It's like, I just know. It's like all the clouds lifted and I had all this information. So what I tell you in all of my videos and in this one as well, what I teach is not information that I've learned from a mentor, even though I tell you what, it would have been so awesome to have a mentor. I wanted a mentor because it's been really hard. I'm going to cry right now. It's been really hard to be the trailblazer and the way shower in all of this, and to not have someone ahead of me to tell me, hey, everything's going to be okay. Like, or to explain things to me when I would encounter new things. It's been really hard. So what I'm sharing with you doesn't come from a mentor. It doesn't come from any books or workshops. It comes from direct experience and the downloads. And even since that summer with all the mega downloads, I've had a lot more downloads along the way. And I've also had more personal experiences, which I won't get into today, but they will show up in a future book. And I've worked with a lot of clients. And so now, several years after that psychic attack, I 110% firmly believe that what I'm saying is absolutely true, especially with all of the different clients that I've worked with and all of the things that I've seen. And by the way, I am a clairvoyant. I can see energies. I'm clairaudient. I can hear things. Clairsentient. I can feel. I have all of the clairs. And so working with clients over the years and seeing these patterns, I know exactly how false light entities work. I know exactly how they feel like. I know what they feel like. I know that they look a certain way. They have a certain MO. They interact a certain way. I've had so many encounters with false light entities that I know exactly what the patterns are. So when I share with you who I believe are false light entities in this video today, it's not something that someone else told me or that I read in a blog article somewhere. It's what I know from my personal experience and as a clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient, etc. That said, even though I've expressed that I do believe I have more knowledge in this than most people, I'm not in any way saying that you should disregard your own inner knowing. So I want you to take in, hopefully, I'm hoping that you will take in what I say, and if something doesn't resonate, then just kind of like keep it over here on the shelf, mull it over, but always, first and foremost, run things through your own filter and do what's right for you. So if there's somebody that I say is a false light entity and it's totally bad to work with, and you feel like I'm completely wrong, that's okay. Like, I would be remiss if I didn't come out and tell you this information that I truly believe. But it will be up to you to just follow what is right for you. Okay? Let me just make sure that I covered everything. Oh, there was something that I wrote down in my notes, and it's that you might not realize this, but sometimes our spiritual gifts are awakened through trauma. And you may have had some spiritual gifts that were awakened through trauma, or there's various ways that spiritual gifts that can be opened up. For me, what I went through in 2016, I had PTSD afterwards. It was really traumatic, and sometimes trauma can really blast open certain gifts, and so that was true in my case. How did I know that we needed to talk about this topic of ascended masters and which ones are false light? So, in our Facebook group that we're doing this Facebook Live in right now, a couple weeks ago, there was a question in one of our weekly question posts. There was a question about Saint Germain and the violet light. And it was a perfectly fine question, perfectly great question. And it was actually really wonderful that this person asked the question, because it opened up Pandora's box in a good way of some information that needed to be covered. So when she asked the question about Saint Germain and the violet light, I did answer honestly, and I will tell you, you guys, I'll circle back around, I'll tell you what I think about Saint Germain and the violet light. But as you might guess, I am going to say that he is a false light entity, but I'll circle back to that. Some people responded very positively to that, saying that they had always felt like something was off about Saint Germain, and they always felt repelled by that energy, and now they felt very validated, like, because they felt that way, but they never knew why. So now this was very validating that I was saying what I was seeing. There were a few people who didn't agree, which, by the way, is totally fine. Like, I want people to think for themselves in my group. But I did notice that some who disagreed got really triggered, and they were like, but I really like the violet flame. There's all these people have told me that it's really good, and I really like Saint Germain. And by the way, Kyle Gray has an oracle deck that has Saint Germain in it, and I'm like, okay, that's great that there's a deck out there, but does that mean anything? There's this tendency in the New Age, and probably everywhere, it's kind of a human trait. It's that when we encounter something like in a book or in an oracle deck, there's kind of this assumption that, like, well, like an author who, and I really like Kyle Gray, this is his deck. I'll talk about this deck in a little while. But there's an assumption that, like, the author or the teacher knows more than we do. And I know I just said that I know more than you do about false light. But you don't have to believe me on that. Like, I'm just saying what I believe is true. You don't have to take my word for it. There is this tendency with authors, with spiritual teachers, there's this tendency for people to think, immediately defer to this belief that they know more than you do. And so if it's in their book, it must be correct. And I really hope that you will switch out of that kind of thinking. Like, anything that I say, I hope you will question. I don't want you to just believe whatever I tell you. Oh, that would really be horrible. Actually, don't do that, please. But there's this tendency, and I just think that it's human nature. So I don't fault anyone for it. But I think there's this like, well, all these other books have said that it's fine, therefore it's fine. And so it really threw a few people off, and they left the Facebook group immediately. Again, it's fine to disagree. That's totally fine. What I found problematic was that whenever someone was faced with an idea that was different than their currently held belief, they completely door slammed. Like, I'm out of here. Bye. I'm leaving. And I think that can be problematic. So I think we need to stay open to new ideas. This is how we can learn our deeper truths and even affirm what we really truly believe. Like, if what you get from this video at the end, if you end up gaining more clarity that your beliefs are true and that I'm totally wrong, then I would feel like this video was successful, because I don't need you to believe me. It's not about my ego. I want you to think for yourself, okay? But if the first second that I said something that you didn't agree with, you clicked it off, I think that would be a problem, because I think we need to be more open to exploring ideas, right? And if we have such a knee-jerk response, it makes me wonder why that is. Why? So I'm not going to go into that, but why, if there's a knee-jerk response, why is that? If we feel really secure and grounded in what we believe, there's no need to be so reflexive and to door slam, right? But anyway, after that situation in our Facebook group, which was totally fine, beautiful, perfect, like absolutely cool Pandora's box that happened. And I thought, oh, we totally need to cover this in our next Facebook Live. We totally do. So I see some comments came through, and I'm going to read those. And then we're going to get into talking about our deck. I think I had a couple more things in my notes, so I'm going to talk about that. I'll read your comments, and then I will get to the cards. So, all right, so I'm going to say something rather controversial here, but it is something through all of my experiences since 2016 that I truly, truly believe to be true. I truly, truly believe it to be absolute fact. And it's that more than 80%, I think 80% is a little low, more than 80%, so we're getting towards like 90% range of what's coming through in the New Age community is actually false light. And again, I know that's controversial, so take a breath. If you don't agree, you can just kind of remain open. I really believe this is true, that more than 80% of New Age content coming through right now is false light. So that includes channelings. Most of those are false light entities. That includes a lot of teachings. That includes a lot of books and oracle cards. And that doesn't mean that every single thing in an author's book is totally false and totally wrong. That's not how false light works. The content coming through might be like 80% correct, accurate spiritual information, and then there's false information interwoven in there. That's a very sociopathic method of manipulation, actually. That because if everything was lies, no one would believe it. But a sociopath's approach would be to give you a whole bunch of truths and then weave those manipulations or those lies, false information, misleading information in there so that you would fully believe it. And so that's what's going on in the New Age community. And so that's why it's really important for there to be discernment. Now, I am going to talk about Doreen Virtue's deck today. I've mentioned Kyle Gray. For the most part, I don't really mention specific authors' names, nothing like that, because this is not intended to like defame or put down anybody's work. First and foremost, I always want to support all of my colleagues, other spiritual teachers, other authors, and so this is not a video for calling out this person or that person. That's not how I roll. This is about any false information. That said, I am going to be talking about Doreen Virtue, and I'll circle back to her in just a minute. Okay. So before I read your comments and before I get into talking about the specific false light entities, to be clear, as I go through some of the cards in Doreen Virtue's deck, I am not going to be saying that all of them are false light entities. There actually are some that are genuine, that are actually true. So let me read your comments and we'll come back to that. Saw we had several. We have a lot of new people who joined. Thank you for joining. Adrian says hello from Southern Ontario, Canada. And I have a lot of people joining live. This is great. April says, I just heard of this Saint Germain and the violet light, and I did not get the right feeling for where I was learning. Okay. Yeah, so your gut feeling was telling you something was off. She says, yes, and it does not feel right when it probably is not right. Yeah, listening to our gut feeling. And normally I would say listen to your gut. Oh, I forgot to mention, this is really important before we go further. I want to really emphasize that false light is way, way more convincing than you might have ever imagined. It is really, really convincing. So that's why there are people who have there are spiritual teachers, there are healers who have a really good head on their shoulders, who are really grounded individuals, who are discerning, and who still are not realizing that they're working with false light entities. I know I mentioned that before, but I want to emphasize, and I want to share a really short story. When I first moved to Tucson about a year and a half ago, I think this situation happened a little over a year ago. I'm going to be a little bit vague with the details because I always want to honor and respect all people and colleagues, etc. So I was out and about in the community, and I had an encounter. I'm trying to keep it really vague. I observed where I was at that there was some weird energy, and I thought, what the heck is this all about? And it was in a spiritual place. It wasn't like at the grocery store. And I'm like, this is weird. Well, so I'm going to tell the condensed version of this story. It'll show up in a future book or blog post. So I could tell there was something weird going on there, and I heard and identified it as false light because it had this really weird high-pitched sound, and I felt like kind of sick when I was around it. And so then I went to my car, I did a whole clearing when I got into my car. This particular type of false light entity, though, is like the hardest thing to clear, way harder than demons. Okay, I'm telling you, way harder than demons. They are sociopaths. They don't listen to boundaries. So it's no big surprise that even though I cleared it, I set boundaries and said, you're not allowed to follow me home. Guess what? It didn't follow those boundaries at all. It followed me home. And that night I was having all sorts of visions in my sleep. I woke up and I was like, oh, there's, I was hearing this voice and seeing these beings. And now I'm a clairvoyant, so I see energies and beings all the time. This is the work that I do with clients. But this was different. It was really strong, like really strong. And they were saying, we are the Council of Orion, and we understand that you have been seeking truth about the nature of reality, which is true. Like, I am a seeker. I want to know what the heck is going on here. We understand that you are seeking truth, and we want to channel messages through you. Well, with all the experiences that I had had so far with false light, I said, I'm not so sure that this is what it's saying that it is, especially since I had that false light encounter that previous day. So then in the morning when I woke up, actually I forgot to mention. Okay, so I went to bed. Sorry, I hadn't planned on telling this story. When I went to bed, so rewind, I went to bed that night after encountering the false light entity. And as soon as I closed my eyes, I saw and knew that there were all of these gods and goddesses from the ancient pantheons that were standing around my bed. And they said, we're here to protect you because you had that encounter with that false light entity. And immediately, and this came through really strong. I do not believe it was my imagination. And that's also a red flag of false light, is it comes through super strong. Like, actual spiritual messages are very subtle. This type of false light entity comes through really, really strong. So it's like, we are here to protect you. I'm like, I'm not so sure that you are who you say you are. And then in the middle of the night, then it changes and it's saying, we are the Council of Orion. Now notice in both instances, this one being was pretending to be a group of beings. First, this whole pantheon of gods and goddesses, and then next, a whole council of aliens from the Orion belt in outer space. Okay, I don't normally channel aliens, and so when I got up in the morning, so actually when I was laying there in bed and I was half asleep, I'm one of those people that hits the snooze button a lot. So I hit the snooze button, and then I was hearing this like persistent message coming through. You do not need to be afraid. We are the Council of Orion. We want to give you these messages. Please don't be afraid. We're trying to impart this knowledge to you. And I'm like, wow, it is persistent. And so then I got up and I went and sat out on my patio, and I took a few moments and I grounded and I centered in my own energy, and I asked, were those beings actually authentic? Were they what they say they were, or was that actually the false light entity? And I got very clearly it was the false light entity, both times. The pantheon of gods and goddesses and the group of aliens. Okay, and that was a really, and then I worked on clearing it. There's more to that story, but that's the relevant part for now. The really profound thing that hit me from that experience was, wow, I mean, if I hadn't known what I already knew, I could totally see how, like, even a very discerning, okay, I hope it wasn't interrupted. Someone was trying to call me. I could see how even someone very, very discerning would be fooled by that. And so when I say that people are still being fooled, I'm not trying to put anyone down. I mean, it was really convincing. And you know, and there are several people who, there's at least one person, if not a handful of people, who are thinking that they're channeling alien messages, and they're telling people that they're channeling alien messages, and they hang out where this entity hitchhiked onto me. So it's very convincing. Okay, I'm going to read some more comments, and then we're going to get into our list of Ascended Masters. So I hope that story is really powerful and helps you understand that, like, you don't know what you don't know until you know it. Once you see the tiger in the image, then you can't unsee it. But before you see it, you just can't see it. And that false light is it's very enticing. Oh, this is another thing that I didn't point out is, as I was pondering that situation, I thought about how it would be very easy for someone's ego to get stoked by that entity, because it was saying like, oh, you're going to be very special, and you're going to be channeling these messages from the Council of Orion, and all these people will listen to you. And I'm like, no, but like, you know, if someone is vulnerable in the area of ego, false light entities can really play on that big time. So watch out for that. Hey, Hamad, good to see you. Jennifer from Overland Park, Kansas. Nick says, Orion. Yep, that's a total lie. The whole thing with Orion is also hijacked. I learned about that from another lady that I trust, and then heard it from you too. Wow. Yep. Okay. So I know that I spent a lot of time like setting this up, but I really feel like that was important. Going into all of this background, 45 minutes of background information, because I think what's important is for you to be able to make this assessment yourself. So earlier in the video, I said to Stephanie, I have good news and I have bad news. And the good news is we're going over this information. Bad news is, once I laid out this whole deck, I realized, wow, there's no way. It's going to take us hours. Unless if I just held up one card at a time and said, false light, not false light, blah, blah, blah. But it's not that simple. And you'll see when I start going through them. I think I chose 10, and it took me an hour of, I sat out in nature, and I asked to be guided to the 10 cards that I was supposed to pull. And I did it without looking. I shuffled and I laid out 10 cards. And maybe it's 11. I can't remember. I laid them out and then turned them over. So that was how these particular specific ones were chosen. I didn't personally choose them. They chose, or, you know, it was chosen for us. And with each one, it wasn't so simple because, well, you'll hear when we get into it. So we're not going to go through every single card in the deck. But before I forget, I'm not here to sell you my book. I promise. But I really think that with what I've shared with you in this 45 minutes, and if you haven't read my book yet, if you read that, I think you'll have a better awareness and ability to be able to discern for yourself. So I'm going to show you the book. It's on Amazon. Darkness Disguised as Light. The Hidden Truth About Psychic Protection and the Illusion Matrix. That's about the false light. Darkness Disguised as Light by me, Maya Zahira, on Amazon. Okay, so you can do some research yourself. I don't want you ever to be dependent on me for figuring out what's false light and what's not false light. This is just to give you a springboard, okay? Also, as I mentioned, I'm going to be focusing mainly on Doreen Virtue's deck. Some of you probably already know Doreen Virtue used to be a New Age author and oracle card creator. And not long after I had my psychic attack experience, she had a really crazy experience where she believes that she saw a vision of Jesus. And I do believe that Jesus exists, by the way. I do believe in Jesus. I'm not anti-Jesus. But I believe that what she saw was a false light entity, because what ensued after that was total chaos in her life. And if you go back and watch videos, any ones that haven't been taken down, and see the before and after, gives me a catch in my throat. I feel really sad for her, and I feel like she went through basically a destruction in her life. And yes, she's partially responsible. I mean, now she made like millions of dollars as a New Age author, and then now speaks out against it and is making money as a Christian author. So there's some integrity issues there. It's not for me to judge. That's not what this video is about. But I do think that she had a false light experience. She believed that she had a vision of Jesus, and because of that vision, she made certain choices. And it's my belief Jesus does not cause a horrible amount of chaos to ensue in your life. And that's what happened to her. So that's what I will say about that. I think I could do a whole other Facebook video just on what happened to her. But we are using her deck. She is no longer creating oracle decks. And so this is an old deck that I've had for a long time, and I haven't used it in a long time because I don't like the deck anymore. Not just because of what she went through, but because the deck didn't resonate with me from the beginning. So we're going to be looking at her cards, some of her cards, but I also want to mention, since it was mentioned in my Facebook group, I want to mention Kyle Gray's book, Keepers of the Light, because that is also a deck that covers false light. Excuse me, I've got a tickle in my throat. It's also a deck that has ascended masters. That's what I was trying to say. It's also a deck that has ascended masters. I had never looked at this deck until yesterday. Someone gave me this deck. Thank you for the person who gave me this deck. And so I opened it up and looked at it for the first time yesterday. To be clear, I'm not anti Kyle Gray. In fact, I have this other deck of his, Angels and Ancestors, and I use it several times a week. I love this deck. It's very grounded and shamanic. And this just goes to show that even though there may be some false light content influencing a lot of the New Age, that doesn't mean that every single thing that a person creates is 100% false light or misleading information. And what I found is that some spiritual teachers are more influenced by false light than others. And so there are some that I don't even bother reading any of their books or using any of their material because it's all just totally false. And they don't know it. They probably don't know it. But with someone like Kyle Gray, I'm not against him. I love this deck. I've listened to him on Hay House Radio. He sounds like a wonderful person. And like I said before about other colleagues and teachers, like this stuff is so convincing and you just don't know what you don't know until you know it. So that's my perspective on that. So I'm not against all of his stuff. But I did look at this yesterday. I think because we have so much to go over, I'll have to cycle back around and do some of his cards at another time and do a similar evaluation then. I did notice that he has a lot of different ascended masters than Doreen Virtue has in her deck, and I didn't realize that was going to be the case until I had already gone through and brought in messages about these 10 or 11 in Doreen's deck. So that's just FYI. Okay. Let's see. Molly is joining from Overland Park, but she's in the Bahamas right now. That's awesome. April, yes, learning thyself is a very important part of learning discernment. And Stephanie says, that's so funny because I got both of those Kyle Gray decks at the same time, and the animal one I have used and really like it, but the angel one always felt false and I didn't open it. So this is, I think, is this the animal one? This is angels and ancestors. You probably mean that the keepers of the light, the one about ascended masters, maybe felt a little bit off. Still, if I were to compare decks, this one to this one, Kyle Gray's Ascended Master deck to Doreen Virtue's Ascended Master's deck, this one feels really wonky. Like, I don't even want to touch it. It's messed up energy, like totally false light oozing all over it. This one, I really think that for me, I feel a lot of Kyle Gray's energy. I think he's a very authentic and caring person who really cares about the work that he's doing, and I could feel that in the cards. And there were still ascended masters in the deck that are false because he just doesn't know. So I would say this deck is way worse, but I honestly wouldn't use either one because there's false light entities in both decks. Stephanie says, oh yes, Angels and Ancestors has animals on the front. Yes, ma'am. Allergy season. I feel like I'm going to sneeze. Okay, so we're going to go through our list. I have 10 or 11 cards here. And remember, I said how I picked these was not which ones I wanted or which ones I thought you wanted. I shuffled and I asked for divine guidance in what needed to be talked about today. So this is not a fully comprehensive list. I hope that this gives you a springboard so that you can, develop your own discernment in this. Okay, I chose, so the first one, obviously, I wanted to make sure that we had is Saint Germain. This is from all of these are from the Doreen Virtue deck. Saint Germain. Okay, so I know I'm going to be reading a lot from my notes on this part. Thank you for loving me anyway. Saint Germain, in my opinion, he was a person of question. Like, he was a person of questionable character. I've always felt that ever since, like, I didn't even know anything about him years ago, and people were talking about him, and I was like, so in his real life, he's a person who did live, but intuitively, I've always known he was actually a person of questionable character. No, he is not an ascended master. I found, from some of the information I'm going to read comes straight from the booklet. He was a count from the French region called Saint-Germain, and he was a wonderman of Europe in the early 1700s. What I get is that he was a charlatan. Why are we thinking that a charlatan has become an ascended master? So I think we need to up our game in really going deeper. So what I know and believe about Saint Germain, aside from what I've already said, is that all aspects of Saint Germain are false light. What this means is that Saint Germain, he did live as a human being. He was a wonderman of Europe in the early 1700s, but he was also a charlatan. And no, he never has become an ascended being. He's just a normal human soul. And not only that, but he kind of had a problematic lifetime when he was alive in the 1700s. So no, he's not an ascended master. And in addition to that, all of these visions and channelings that people are bringing through of him are not even the actual man. I forget his real name. I apologize. I don't remember what his name was, but that doesn't matter, in my opinion. It's not relevant to this. Any visions that people have had of him or information they've channeled through, it's not coming from Saint Germain. It's coming from false light entities who are pretending to be Saint Germain. So what happens is something begins, like a trend, something trendy starts to take hold in New Age or spiritual culture. Someone starts to teach about it or talk about it, and then everyone believes it. And then everyone else's teachers are talking about it. And then everyone else's teachers are talking about it. And so when you've heard about it so much, it's only human nature to just like assume that it is what it is. Because why question it? Because like the whole belief about Saint Germain is so pervasive, right? Okay. Rochelle, is he the one mentioned in the violet flame? Oh, thank you for asking that. I was going to totally forget about mentioning the violet flame. Yes, a lot of teachings about Saint Germain talk about using something called the violet flame. And because Saint Germain is indeed totally false light, 100%, I don't recommend working with anything related to Saint Germain, including the violet flame, anything related to anything that's being taught, any methods, techniques that are connected with Saint Germain. That said, I think it's really important to understand that there's nothing wrong with working with colors, different light frequencies in your healing, in your evolution, your spiritual evolving. It's totally fine to work with purple light, with violet light, with green light, with, blue light, whatever light, golden light, any color vibrations that resonate for you, you can work with them. There's nothing wrong with colors. I work with colored light all the time. So I want to be really clear about that, because there were some people in the Facebook group that were thinking that I was saying that color healing was false light. No, that's not correct at all. Colors are part of our existence, and our chakras vibrate at certain color frequencies. We have different color frequencies in our aura, etc., etc. So all of that is good, but the violet flame and Saint Germain, all of that, I would just avoid. Yep. And I appreciate that you asked that question, because I was almost ready to forget. I forgot that part in my notes. All right. So the next card that I pulled, and this was random pull, is Athena. And this is one of the goddesses from the Greek pantheon, so an ancient goddess. She is the Grecian goddess of wisdom. Now, this is what I was getting yesterday when I was sitting out in nature. I pulled each of these cards, I sat with it, and I tuned into inner knowing, and I brought in information on what I truly believe, the information that I received about each of these beings. So what I get is, yes, the goddess Athena is a real being, and is a benevolent being. That yes, she is real. There is actually a goddess Athena, as opposed to Saint Germain, where there is actually no ascended being Saint Germain. It doesn't exist. There's only false light. So Athena does exist. Yes, she is real, but I need to mention the difference between the real and the false light versions. So are there false light versions of every authentic being, like every important authentic being? Absolutely. The false light agenda is to try to fool anybody. So they're going to pretend to be whoever they can be, even if it's your deceased relative, or a god or goddess, or an ascended being. Okay, so that's true. So what I'm saying is Athena is real, is a real being, but are there times when someone thinks that they're channeling Athena and it's actually a false light being? Yes, absolutely yes. Okay? That's what gets really tricky. It's really tricky, I know. What I'm getting about Athena is that she was very, very connected with the earth back in ancient times. I felt empathically, I felt all of the love that she had and has for humankind and for animals and for the earth, but that she is not currently on the planet. But those of you who may work with her, she does hear your prayers and rituals, and she is aware telepathically. So she is an ascended being. She's a non-human. Okay? So there are ascended beings who became very evolved in their lifetime. I'll talk about one or two of them. Athena, what I'm getting was never a human being. This was a higher being from the beginning. Okay? And not a human being. So she used to be very connected with the earth. She is no longer, but it's still fine to work with her if you like to work with gods and goddesses from the ancient pantheons. The next one that I picked randomly was Kuan Yin. And by the way, I loved that I got a variety here. I didn't get the variety of every culture though, and I want to acknowledge that. But I felt like it was like once I got to the end, it felt like it was enough. I needed to just stop. So the next one that we have, number 3, is Kuan Yin. And Kuan Yin is the Buddhist goddess of compassion. And I get, yes, she is very much real. And, but I wouldn't work with the version that's Doreen Virtue's version. I wouldn't work with this version. I wouldn't work with any that are connected with these cards, because guaranteed they're all false light. Because what Doreen was bringing through at this time was false light. By the way, I think that's kind of what freaked her out. Why she went so anti-New Age and pro-Christian and all the rest of that is evil is because I don't think she understood that what was happening was that she was encountering false light stuff. And so because she didn't understand, I think she just has decided that it's all bad, it's all evil. So yeah, everything in this deck is bad. But Kuan Yin as an ascended being absolutely does exist. And when I tuned into her, what I felt was a divine presence being, like this beautiful white mist, this being of energy, and that she forms into the shape of a beautiful woman, and that she is a very highly evolved being. Now, I want to point something out. When I was shown how she shifts from this like beautiful white mist light being into a humanoid form, that's a form of shape-shifting. False light entities shape-shift from their true form, whatever it might be, to pretend to be an ascended being or an angel or Jesus or whatever. So they shape-shift. But I want to distinguish that there are authentic and benevolent beings that might choose to take on more than one form. Like maybe their natural form is pure energy, but there are times when they choose to take on a form that we could relate to more. And that doesn't mean that she's false light. It simply means that she shifts from one appearance to another. I hope that makes sense. All right. I think I had more written down about her. And that to point out that yes, there are people who think that they're working with Kuan Yin, but they're actually working with a false light entity. Because remember what I said, every authentic being out there is going to have false light entities pretending to be it. So it gets tricky. It gets tricky. Okay. And I also, what I wrote down was that any false light entities don't even closely resemble Kuan Yin. So it's like a poor knockoff of the real version. And so this is where you're going to work on your discernment. Like if you ever have a vision of Kuan Yin, that like usually when it's false light, there's something off. If you notice that there's something off, the appearance doesn't look right, or you get a funny feeling, that's what I mean by it's a poor knockoff of the authentic real version. Okay? All right, so we've got a couple of comments here. Whoa. Nick says, I wonder if when Doreen Virtue saw this false light info that it turned her away from all her gifts. I think that's what happened. I do. I think that she had, and she has written and talked about this vision of Jesus that she had, but what it caused her to do was like destroy her life. She lost her livelihood. She ended up being disconnected from some of her family members. She lost friends. She lost her publisher. And she also shut down all of her gifts. So she was no longer helping people in the way that she was before, which is exactly what the dark forces wanted. That's my opinion. That's what I truly believe. I also recognize I don't know the whole story. No one does except for her, you know. So that's just my opinion based on intuitively what I get and also with the little bits of information that are out there. Nick says, I only say that because I can see how that could happen. Yes, indeed. If somebody is helping a lot of people, the dark forces are going to want to swoop in and just obliterate that person. I experienced something similar in the past, unless she was a shill or something. Or a shill or completely... Sorry, my comment cut off. Yeah. April. Yes, they are full of trickery. Hamad says, since false light entities are shapeshifters, are they jinns? Yeah, so I was trying to keep things pretty simple, but I'm glad that you asked this. So there are different kinds of false light entities. I use false light entities as an umbrella term for any spiritual being that is pretending to be something that it's not. So there are demons that will do this. They will act as false light entities. They will pretend to be angels or your deceased relatives or whatever. And there are djinn, which are another kind of entity. If you want to know more, if this sparks your interest, you guys, and you want to know more about djinn, there's a whole separate video on the YouTube channel, Psychic Protection Sanctuary, in the Psychic Protection playlist. It's from just a couple of months ago, all about djinn. But yes, djinn are one type of false light entity. There are also some human souls that are more powerful, that are able to shapeshift. There are elementals. There are some that are not so friendly. I've only had encounters with friendly ones, yay, but there are some that are unfriendly that can shapeshift. There are a variety of beings, so many different kinds of beings in existence. Jinn are just one kind, and I've had several encounters with jinn, as Hamad knows, and that was the type of entity that I encountered, that I talk about in this book. And also the story that I told about the thing that was saying that it was from the Council of Orion, that was a jinn as well. So Joe says, I had a false light experience with Kuan Yin. I got a total bliss out. That's how I finally knew that it was false light. I'm so glad that you mentioned this in your comment. So one red flag to it being a false light being is if you get totally blissed out. You guys will learn so much if you read this. It's going to help you understand way more about how to identify them than just this 90-minute video. So I encourage you to read it if it resonates with you. Yeah? Okay, so we're going to go through. Hi, Courtney. We're going to go through a few more. Okay, number 4 on the list is Merlin. Merlin. Okay, so from Doreen Virtue's little booklet, he is associated with King Arthur's Camelot, and she even says in her description, I quote, "No one knows for certain whether Merlin actually lived as a mortal or not." I was like, yeah, duh. Like, he did not exist. When I tuned in intuitively, I got, no, he was a myth. Like, I don't see anything wrong with reading books about Camelot or about Merlin or about, like, some of my favorite movies have been about Camelot and have had Merlin as a character. There's nothing wrong with that. That's all. Like, a Hollywood movie or a book is not false light. It's a cool story. But he did not actually exist. He is actually a myth, a story. And all channelings and visions of him are, guess what? False light. Okay? So if someone says that they're channeling Merlin, they're either channeling false light or they're pulling it out from you know where. Like, it's not real. Okay? Oh, Rochelle, great question. Does the book come in can't talk tonight. Does the book come in digital format? Yes, it comes in Kindle and paperback, and you can get it on Amazon. Darkness disguised as light. Okay, I've gone through a lot of preliminary information, so now we're going to go through a few more of these cards. Tara was the next card that I pulled. Tara is the Eastern goddess of enlightenment. And her energy, when I tuned into her and I tuned in about this, her energy felt very similar to Kuan Yin. So my first thought was, are they the same being? Because sometimes as humans, we have different names for different beings, but maybe it's the same being. But actually, what I got very clearly was that no, these are two distinct beings. I'm just ever the questioner, so my mind immediately went there. These are two distinct beings. They're not the same, but they have an affinity for each other. Their energies feel kind of similar. And she also, when I tuned into her, she is also a soft light. I wouldn't describe it as mist, but more of a soft light. And she also forms into an impression of a woman, just like Kuan Yin, but different. And yes, there are false light beings who will pretend to be Tara or any other ascended being, and pretending that they're your spirit guide or whatever. But there are people who authentically do have the real Tara working with them. Okay? So it's about discernment. Tara does exist. Tara is an authentic ascended being. And with every authentic ascended being, there are also frauds. Okay? Stephanie says, I have the book on Kindle Unlimited and 2 physical copies. It makes a great gift. Thank you, Stephanie. That was awesome. Okay, the next one is Lady Nada. This is another popular ascended master that I hear talked about, not as much as Saint Germain, but a fair amount in New Age. The first time that I heard about her was with some people who were talking about working with the Akashic Records, and they were talking about how she is one of the guardians of the Akashic Records. And what happened when I looked at this card, I immediately got false light entity. False light entity. It was like, boom, hit me. And then I looked in the book, and the book says she works with Saint Germain. And I was like, well, there you go. I just started laughing when I saw that. Well, it says she works with Saint Germain and Archangel Michael. I'm gonna talk about Archangel Michael in a little bit. but I'm like, yeah, there's my answer. Like, totally false light, not a being that I would want to work with. Okay. All right. Ooh, the next one. We do have some really nice variety here in this pile. We have Oshun. Oshun. African goddess of rivers and waters. I love this being. When I tuned into her energy, she feels really, really good to me. Very grounded, very primordial, and this wonderful mother figure who flows through all things. I just loved tuning into that energy. Is she a false light entity? No. She's a real being. But also what I got was, I don't know what this is really all about, but I got this hit that in some regions of the world, I wrote down, in some regions and populations of the world, a false version of her is being used to harm people. And I didn't go too much deeper with it because it was taking quite a while to go. It took me about an hour to bring through information about each one of these. But it was something about how there are certain regions of the world and certain populations where false versions of her are being utilized very intentionally to hurt certain populations. I don't know what that's about. So, just coming back to the main point, like, yes, there are authentic ascended beings, but there are false versions of everything. So you got to just assume that. I love her energy. I started crying. Just this primordial, like, I don't even know how to describe it. Yeah, the Great Mother, the sacred waters. Just, I love that. I love that energy. Okay, the next one. We have just a couple more. I know this is definitely a long class. Hopefully not too much longer than 90 minutes. Okay, the next one that I pulled was Buddha. And I have good news for you guys. I'm not going to tell you that Buddha is false, like I said about Saint Germain. So Buddha was a real man who lived in the 5th century BC. I know I'm going to mispronounce his name, but his name when he was living was Siddhartha, can't read my writing, Gautama. And he was born into wealth in what is now present-day Nepal. He gave up his lavish lifestyle. He was a man who lived a real human life, who then died and became an ascended master. So he became very evolved when he was living his human life, and then he finished his human lifetime and has become even more and more evolved spiritually on the other side, and he would be considered an ascended master. What I get is that when I tune into him, he looked larger than life. So usually when I see a human soul, they're like basically human size, but he was like so huge, which just indicates his level of evolvement. He watches over, protects, and imparts wisdom to the earth and parts of the universe as well. That's what I got. So, is Buddha real? Yes. Are there going to be false light versions of Buddha? Yes, because that's true across the board. Okay, so if Buddha starts showing up for you, you'll want to just use your discernment and decide whether he's false or not. Okay, next one, we're almost done, is Jesus. I was really glad that we got this card. Jesus. All right, so what I get about this, again, being the open-minded skeptic, I don't assume that anything is true or not. I tuned in, intuitively, did this person actually live? Did this person actually exist as a person? Yes. And and in a similar way to Buddha, that he lived a human lifetime and was more evolved than most humans at the time, and that after he passed on, he shifted into being an ascended spiritual being. So yes, he is authentic. He is a real ascended being. But I want to really emphasize that right now in the New Age world, there is a ton of false light, channeled Jesus. And one of my friends, she might be on here watching right now. We jokingly talk about fake Jesus because like fake Jesus is being channeled like everywhere, and it's not actually authentic Yeshua. It's not at all. It's false light beings are having a heyday channeling Jesus to a lot of people in the Western world who perhaps were raised Christian, and then they move out of that and they become New Age. And so hearing about the New Age Jesus helps them feel like a little bit more comfortable, because it's sort of what they were raised with but different, and so they start channeling Jesus, and it's not even the real Jesus at all. It's this fraud. Okay. Can someone authentically connect with Jesus, with Yeshua, bring through messages? Absolutely, yes. But the false light Jesus is way more prevalent. Like there's just tons. It's just filled. The whole spiritual communities, New Age, etc., just filled with fake Jesus stuff, like everywhere. Ugh, it's crazy. Okay, the last one, number 10. And then we're going to have a bonus one after that. Number 10 card that I pulled is Archangel Michael. Archangel Michael. And this is a similar thing to Jesus. So although Archangel Michael is from the angelic race and is not from the human race, Archangel Michael is an angel, an archangel, and is authentically, it's kind of interesting that she had him in an Ascended Masters deck, because whatever, I would have put him in an angel deck, but that's just me. Yes, he is an authentic, highly evolved spiritual being. Yes, he works for the benefit of humankind and for the planet. He is working against the dark forces. There is a real, actual, benevolent Archangel Michael that exists. Absolutely, yes. Strong yes. Okay? But just like Jesus, there's tons of fake Archangel Michael like stuff coming through. In fact, I had an experience about a year after my 2016 psychic attack. I had an experience where I was in my house. I was walking from one spot to another, and I saw at first what I thought was Archangel Michael down on one knee, and I think he had a sword, I'm pretty sure, but something felt a little bit off, and I realized, and this was actually, oh no, okay, I'm getting my stories mixed up. This actually happened during the 2016 attack, because it was when I was dealing with this false light entity. I walked into my bedroom. Sorry, I was getting my stories mixed up. I walked into my bedroom and I saw this being that I first assumed was Archangel Michael, and something was not right. I felt like something was off, and but that's who it was trying to present as, and but it was trying to present as something different every day until I figured out that I was dealing with a false light entity and what false light entities were. But before I had that epiphany, it was trying to appear as all sorts of different things. So anyway, so yes, are there fake versions of Archangel Michael? Absolutely, there's a lot of that. But is Archangel Michael real and authentic? Is there a real Archangel Michael who is a benevolent angelic being? Yes, absolutely. So after I picked the 10 cards, I was just browsing through this deck and realizing, holy cow, I haven't even gone through all of these cards for Doreen Virtue's deck, but there's a whole bunch of different Ascended Masters in this deck. And I'm like, well, I'm going to have to do that in a different Facebook Live, because we can't have a 5-hour Facebook Live, and that would just be too long. But there was one card that really stood out to me. I don't even know if I have it on top anymore, or if I mixed it in. And I want to, nope, I think it got mixed in with all the others. Nope, here it is. It's so important that I wanted to mention it, even though I'm going into a different deck. Because this being is also really heavily hijacked by the false light forces. This is Mary Magdalene. I personally love Mary Magdalene, and I love Mother Mary. I love both of the Marys so much. This is a beautiful picture. I love the artwork in his deck, by the way. But I have encountered numerous people who are channeling false Mary Magdalene, and it's almost as popular as false Jesus. So be discerning. And I think the final thing that I would say is I really empathize and I understand when someone is really emotionally invested, and maybe even financially invested if they're making money off of channelings and healing work. I really empathize. I understand it can be hard to realize that maybe what you've been working with for a while might not be what you thought that it was. And that can really feel like a lot of what you believed in starts crumbling away. And it can create an existential crisis. And I truly understand that. I also understand that when we're really emotionally attached or even financially attached to what ends up being a false light entity, something happens in our brain that just closes off what the truth is because we don't want to see it. So I just hope and pray that over the next several years that more and more people begin to wake up and to develop the discernment, and that can see what's really happening, and have that experience that once they see it, they can't unsee it, right? That more and more people can wake up. That's my hope. All right, we have a couple of comments, and then we're going to wind it up. Stephanie says, my son at age 2 in a metaphysical shop looked up and pointed and said, Buddha. We didn't teach him that before. It was so cute. Oh yeah, he is like a naturally spiritual child. That's so cool. Nora says, thank you, Maya. Great class as always. Nick says, wonderful class. Been waiting for this one. Thank you so much. All right. So thanks you guys. Thank you very much. And just a quick announcement and a reminder that I really want you to develop your own discernment. And one way that you can get more information so that you can develop your own discernment is getting information about what actually this stuff is all about. Darkness Disguised as Light on Kindle and in paperback on Amazon. And if you're not in the Facebook group, if you're watching the replay, join us in Psychic Protection Sanctuary Facebook group. If you haven't checked out the YouTube channel, go and subscribe, Psychic Protection Sanctuary. And you can also work with me more deeply by checking out my website, psychicprotectionsanctuary.com. Click on Work with Maya, and you'll see all the different ways that you can work with me. I have a lot of free content out there, all the way from free, all the way up to like really expensive things. So it all depends on where you're at and what you're needing. And before we go, I want to let you know what next month's topic is going to be. It's very different from today's topic. We're going to be talking about HSPs, which is the short version of highly sensitive people. HSPs and empaths, understanding and managing your sensitivities. So we're totally switching it up. If you're an HSP, an empath, or consider yourself to be a sensitive, I'm going to go through some content that I've never taught in the free content before. So I invite you to join us. We have a free Facebook Live every first Monday of the month. And the only way you can join is by joining the Facebook group Psychic Protection Sanctuary. And Jennifer says, thanks, Maya. Joe says, thanks for the class, Maya, as always. April says, thanks, Maya Zahira, for your insight on this topic. I hope for the same with those awakening. Jeannie says, extremely interesting and wonderful. Thank you. Rochelle, thank you. Rose, thanks again. Stephanie says, this was awesome. Thanks so much. Yeah, and Jeannie says, I'm both an HSP and an empath. Yes. And Hamad says, I believe we all are. Yep, that's probably the case. All right, thanks you guys. Thanks so much. And hi Ming, you're welcome. If you have any questions, you can post them in the Facebook group or you can reach out to me privately. As always, I'm sending you all my love. Until next time, bye.